I'm just going to do a quick overview on how to shoot the moon. There are probably 2 to 3 technical hurdles that one has to overcome in order to get a decent shot of the moon. One of the biggest challenges is filling the frame. Unless you have a 300 or 400 millimeter lens, generally you're going to probably get a $1 to $1/2 size shape or size in your frame. Of course you can crop down and make the moon bigger, which I'll probably do to kind of cheat. That and the fact that the moon moves, so you have to use a fast enough shutter speed as to render the edges pretty sharply. And the third thing to consider is the dynamic range of the moon. If you expose for the surface of the moon, you're going to probably get a really dark sky but a well-exposed moon with the craters. And then if you try to expose for the surrounding area, you're going to get a blown out moon. So I'm going to show you 2 examples of that. The other thing to consider is when the moon's rising on the horizon, it usually looks bigger to the human eye. And that's because when it's on the horizon, it's probably right next to a tree or a house or some type of a man-made structure, which give it some scale. When it's in the sky, there's no sense of scale, so you don't know how large the moon is, but when it's rising or setting on the horizon, it appears bigger than it really is because of the fact that you have some type of a context or point of reference. The other thing is when the moon is rising or setting, you'll notice that the coloring is probably orange or yellowish, and as the moon gets higher in the sky, it starts to get cooler, almost a bluish color. Yeah, so those are some of the things to consider and to keep in mind. I'm shooting with the Canon S90 point and shoot here, and I'm shooting the video, and I'm also going to show you as an example of the image that I took. Now here the moon actually looks kind of bluish because I set the tungsten white balance to tungsten to kind of give it a cool look. Otherwise the moon will probably look more neutral color, but I kind of like this look, kind of the blue, and then you got the ambient light below us. So yeah, when you're out to shoot the moon, you can get decent shots of the moon. Unless you have really specialized equipment, you're gonna probably, it's gonna be hit and miss. With a point and shoot, you can definitely get nice shots of it, but just remember that you probably want a tripod or some type of a support. And if you don't have a cable release or some way to trip the shutter remotely, such as in the case of a point and shoot camera here, I would probably use the self-timer to trip the shutter. That way there's no vibration involved. Other than that, go ahead and have some fun. Some guidelines I would use: if you have manual mode, definitely use that. As a starting point, I would probably set your ISO to 400. Set your shutter speed to 5 seconds, and your aperture to, let's say, f4. And from there, kind of, go back, adjust the shutter or aperture depending on what you want. You don't want to use too long of a shutter speed because then you'll get that blurring action going on, since the moon does move across the sky. So I would generally keep your exposures below 5 seconds. Of course, when you zoom in more, the movement's gonna be magnified. I have mine zoomed out, I think, to 28 millimeters, so it's not gonna move as much. I'm shooting video as well, but that's the other thing to consider. The further you zoom in, the faster the moon's going to appear to move across your frame, and the wider out you are, the slower the moon's going to appear. So if you're using, let's say, a 200 millimeter lens, you probably want to use a faster shutter speed. You may have to crank up your ISO. Now if you're exposing just for the surface of the moon, you can use the Sunny f16 rule, where you can just, because the light that's falling on the moon is basically the sun, and if you want to expose for the craters and some of the surface features, go ahead and, let's say you set your ISO to 100, set your shutter to 100, and your aperture to f16, and you're going to get a pretty well exposed moon. But bear in mind, you may also get a black sky around it. Now a trick to deal with the dynamic range, you can't use HDR since the moon is moving, but what you can do is take 2 exposures, one exposed for the moon itself, using the Sunny f16 rule, and then another one for the surrounding, if you have any cloud action going on, if you want to expose some of the landscape. And then you can merge the 2 images in Photoshop. Another trick that a lot of photographers use, I think, is they'll use a telephoto lens to fill the frame of the moon, and then they'll pull back, use a wide angle lens and expose for the landscape, and then they'll juxtapose both of those images together. They'll paste the moon inside the wide angle shot. If done correctly, it looks pretty good, but if the magnification is too great on the moon itself, it looks fake, so then you gotta kind of have to watch for that as well. So yeah, you don't need a lot of equipment to get a decent shot of the moon, although it certainly won't hurt. Okay, have some fun, and let me know how your images turn out. I'll post some shots that I've shot with this camera as well as my digital SLR to kind of give you an idea. The funny thing is, probably my best shot of the moon is taken with the advanced point and shoot super zoom, because of the magnification factor, and I'll post that as well. Alright, good luck.